Hey, what's up everybody? This is the Helpful Hacker, and today we are going over the Metasploit Exploitation room from TryHackMe. So we're going to jump right in and get started with task number 1, the introduction. So in this room, we're going to cover some more advanced features of Metasploit. I have a room called Metasploit Introduction, or better said, I have a walkthrough of that room from TryHackMe, and that's like Metasploit's intro room. So if you haven't used Metasploit before, or if this is your first time hearing about it or trying to actually use it, I suggest you go check that out on my channel, and that'll just be TryHackMe's Metasploit Introduction. And that'll help you a lot with this room, because like I said here, we're going to be doing some more advanced Metasploit stuff. So what we are going to cover in this room is we're going to talk about scanning targets using Metasploit. We're going to learn about its database features. And then here it says we're going to run a vulnerability scan. I don't really like that because it's not a real full vulnerability scan that we're doing. It's more like they're going to walk us through how to find exploits for a target system using Metasploit and its search function. And then we're also going to talk about how to use Metasploit to actually exploit target systems. So they give us a real easy vulnerability, and we'll walk through it when we get there, and then we're actually going to get to exploit a target system and use that vulnerability to get a Meterpreter session. And then we're going to do the same thing again, but using MSF Venom, which is a program associated or attached with Metasploit that helps produce payloads, basically. So you can make payloads for all sorts of stuff: Linux computers, Windows computers, Apple computers, Android phones. And MSF Venom is basically this little database of payloads, and we just send it some commands and then it'll give us a payload that we can use. So we'll get into all that. And one note that they give here that's really important is we have to be using this word list that they have right here. Now, if you're using the TryHackMe attack box, their browser-based stuff, this word list should just be on the machine. If you're not using that, then you're going to want to download it from the download task files right here. So just hit that button, that'll download the word list for you, and then you can use it to answer all the word list related questions that we're going to have. So read through all that, mark complete, and you are done with task number 1. Now it's on to task number 2, scanning. So first we're going to talk about port scanning. So Metasploit, let me reconnect real quick. So Metasploit, it is able to do port scanning. And the way that you can do that, the easiest way, is you just search for port scan, all one word, and then it'll come up with all these port scanners for you. Now, the most common one that you will be using most often to do TryHackMe rooms or hack the box or whatever is going to be this number 5 right here. It might be a different number depending on which version of Metasploit you're using, but it's just the regular TCP port scanner. And that's the most common one that you'll be using. Real quickly, I'm just gonna start running Metasploit just because I know I'm gonna need it here in a minute, and it does take a while to load. So keep that in mind. So yeah, that's how you can find the port scanners. Just simple search port scan. And again, if you don't know about search, or if you've never used it before in Metasploit, you got to check out my other room, Metasploit Introduction. That'll help a lot. So once you've selected which port scanner you want to use, you're going to take a look at the options. They have all these options down here. You can read through them. You should know what these mean, but the most important ones are going to be our hosts and port. And so ports, that's just going to be which port numbers you want to scan. And then our host is going to be the target that you want to scan. So you can put a range of targets. You could scan a whole network, or you could just scan an individual target. More often than not, if you're playing CTFs, you're going to be just looking at one single IP address that you'll want to scan. So those two are the most important, and you have to fill them out for to actually run a port scan. There is the default, I'm pretty sure in almost all versions of Metasploit, the default is 1 to 10,000. So those ports are all going to be scanned by default. So oftentimes you can just put down the R hosts unless you want to change the port numbers. So take a look at that. And then another really cool thing that I really like about Metasploit is you can run nmap commands directly from the Metasploit command line or from MSF console. And so it's literally the exact same. There's no different, and it'll give you the nmap output. And that's super useful just because nmap, just as an example, so if we were port scanning something using this regular TCP port scanner, it would just tell us what ports are open and what ports are closed, and it might tell us what's running on them. But usually it doesn't tell us what's running on them, and we have to go to a separate module in Metasploit to then figure out what version or what software is running on a port. And so usually to do a really in-depth scan only in Metasploit using Metasploit modules, that's a lot of clicking, that's jumping to different modules, all that stuff. And so it's really convenient that they let you just use nmap because it's super powerful, and I can just add -sv and it'll give me all of the versions of all of these, and I can just see it all right there. So I personally prefer to just use nmap inside of Metasploit because to me it seems to be a bit easier. So I'm going to clear that real quick. I'll just open this up. And then the next thing that they want to talk about is UDP. So you can just search UDP_sweep if you want to run UDP scans. And this is a useful module. It will just let you identify services running on, over UDP. So that's something that you'll have to know just because you should be able to use TCP scanning and UDP scanning, and Metasploit can do both of those for you. And then down here, they specifically point out SMB scanning. That's because some of the questions that we're going to do involve SMB scanning. And there are multiple types of SMB scans. The different scans will be searching for different things. So we have two scans here. One will be looking for the version of SMB. The other one will want to know what shares there are. So, and there's additional ones. You can take a look at users and other things like that. So, and each one of these types of scans will be their own module in Metasploit. So you have to go find the module and then run the scan. It's still really useful though, especially if you know exactly what you're looking for. It should be really easy to find in Metasploit. And for those of you who don't know what SMB is, it stands for server message block. And it's basically, in a lot of corporate networks, it's a way to share files and it's a way to share printers. And it has other functionality as well, but that's what you see it most often used for. So that's what SMB is. You can read more about it if you read through all of this. It also talks a little bit about NetBIOS, which is very similar to SMB. So yeah, you can take a look at that, read through that. We're also going to have to do some NetBIOS stuff as well. And I'll just kind of walk you through how to search for stuff and how to find what you're looking for in Metasploit and then how to run it. So now we'll jump down to the questions. First question here, how many ports are open on the target system? So what we could do is we could search our port scan, or there we go. Oh, that's not it. Okay, so here's our results from searching port scan, and then we could go down to this TCP. Sorry that this is highlighted in yellow. That makes it super hard to read, but that just says port scan. Everything that's highlighted is what I actually searched for. So we could do that and then run that, but I know that later they're going to ask me for a NetBIOS name if I can see it. They're going to ask me what's running on port 80, and so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna use nmap. So I can just nmap-sv because I want to know the version of everything that I'm looking at. And then the IP address is all the way up here at 10.10.78.14, whatever that was. So I'm going to paste that and run that command, and it'll just run nmap right from Metasploit. Again, super useful. So keep that in mind that you can do that. Now, if you did do this regular TCP because you want to get really good at using Metasploit and looking at modules, which is totally fair, I'm doing this mostly for time's sake. That's why I'm doing nmap. You will, to figure out this other stuff, I'll just give you some hints. So if you want to know the NetBIOS name, search NetBIOS, and then there will be a scan that says like NetBIOS_name, or it might just be like name NetBIOS. I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but it should be pretty recognizable, and you'll want to run that. And then if you want to know what's running on port 80, then I'm pretty sure you have to search like HTTP version or something like that, or just HTTP, and see if you can find one that asks for the version for HTTP, because that's what you'd have running on port, not 80. Did I say 80 earlier? I think I did, but port 8000. So check those out. And then we're gonna take a look here. So we can already see, let's see, what do we got? What did they ask us for? The questions were, how many ports are open on the target system? So one. This says, is that 5 or 6? I can't count to save my life. That's 5. So let's take a look at that. Is 5 the correct answer? Yes, it is. So we're done with that. Next question, what is the NetBIOS name that you can see? So because I used this -sv and got all this version info, we can see this name right here, this ACME IT support. So that is the BIOS name. So we'll submit that. And then what was the next question? What is running on port 8000? HTTP WebFS. So HTTPD 1.21. And then did that have a dash in it? Yeah, HTTPD dash 1.21. Not the right answer. Oh, they don't want this. They want this WebFS. Okay. There we go. So WebFS dash 1.21. And then what is the penny user's SMB password? Use the word list mentioned in the previous task. So here we are gonna use a Metasploit module. Now just for fun, I'm gonna search. So if you did not use nmap, or if you wanna try and do this with just Metasploit. So I'm not gonna do this TCP scanner here because we already did that. And so you would do that. You would then go to show options, and then you would select the host. Instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna search NetBIOS, and here we go. So this is the module that you would use to find out the NetBIOS name. Now, if I wanted to figure out what service or what version was running on port 8000, then I'm pretty sure if I just search HTTP version, auxiliary scanner, HTTP version, detection, and then just for fun, we'll actually run this. So let's show options. And this is the similar workflow for all the other ones. It's gonna ask you for, oh, sorry, I need to select use 0 first. So I need to actually, because I'm not in that module yet. So my bad. So now that I've selected I've issued the use 0 command, I've selected this module up here, and I'm now inside it, and this is the full name of the module. Now if I show options, it's going to ask me for our hosts. So I'm just going to set our hosts, and that was, I don't remember what that was. It's up here in my Metasploit, or not my Metasploit, 10.10.78.146. So I'm going to set our hosts, and then I want to set the port to 8,000, not 80, because in our Nmap scan we saw that it was 8,000. Yes, I did. So let's show options. Did it automatically set it for me anyways? No, it didn't. Set our port and then 8,000. Now if I run this, and usually it's a good idea, there we go, webfs/1.21, right? So that was just an example. Again, I don't like to do, if most of my scanning I like to do in Nmap, most people do. I don't like to use Metasploit for all of it, but you can, and you just kind of go through that same process, but for each thing that you want to know. And then if you want to get out of a module, you can just issue the back command, and now I'm back in the main part of Metasploit. So now the last question, what is the Penny user's SMB password? Use the word list mentioned in the previous task. Okay, so to do this, we are going to search, and we're going to search for SMB_login. Now, and then use 0, show options. Now, if you don't know, again, some of these I just know because I have to use them quite a bit in different boxes or, rooms. So like this SMB login, I just kind of know that one, and I know that this is a way that I can use a word list to try and log in. But if you don't know that, what you can do is you can just type in SMB. It'll give you a ton of results, like 140, and then you might just have to manually go through them, or the easiest way, and the way everybody does everything, you can just Google it, say, Google, I want to, not brute force, but I want to use a dictionary attack to log into SMB on Metasploit. How do I do that? And it should pull up this module and send you in this direction. So now we're taking a look at the options here. I do need to set the R hosts, so let's do that. And I believe that was 10.10.78.146. And then what else do we need? We need our word list, which I'm going to double check right here. I'm just going to take it from this because I don't want to type the whole thing because I'm lazy. And so here we can go set. Now this can get kind of confusing because you have this user pass file in user file. So you got to be careful. Don't use the user pass file. The user pass file is a file containing users and passwords, right? So make sure you take a look at the description. What we want is going to be up here. Where is it? Yeah, all the way up here. So pass file. This is just our passwords. So let's set pass file, and then I am going to paste in my word list. Now if I do show options, what have we got? We can see our pass file has been filled in and our R host is filled in. So now I should be able to run this. You can either do run or you can type in exploit. I like to just hit run. Let's see, error 10.10.78.146. Credit details can't be blank. Okay. So all I uploaded was passwords. And if we go back to the question gives us additional information. It lets us know that Penny is the user's name. So that's why I need to also set the, where is it? The username should be somewhere up here. SMB user, right? So let's set that. Now let's show options. There we go, Penny. Right, so you need to have usernames and passwords. Again, if I had both, I could do a username list and a password list, or a user and password list. There's lots of ways to do this, but luckily they gave us the username, so now we will run that, and now we can see it trying. It's trying to log in using Penny as the username and then all of these passwords, and we can see down in this column there's been a success, and that's Leo1234. So that should be our password. No space. Yep, and that's our password for the Penny user. So with that, we are done with task number 2, scanning. Now it's on to the Metasploit database. They don't do a lot in the actual console here in this task, but and I'm not going to go through it just for the sake of time, but I do encourage you to test a bunch of this stuff out and see how it works. Yeah, just do it yourself so you can see what's going on, but they have really good screenshots. So I'm just going to go over the screenshots that show you how to use the Metasploit database. So when you first start Metasploit, or before, the way you would want to do it is before you start Metasploit, and you can actually see it right here because they're on root attack box, so they're not even in the Metasploit database yet, or sorry, they're not even in Metasploit yet. They're just on their regular attack box, and so you have to issue a couple of commands to actually use the database. And so the first command is system control start PostgreSQL. And what this does is, this is a Postgres database, and so Postgres and SQL, and then so you type that in, and this will just start the actual database that Metasploit will be using. And then after that, you have to do msfdb init. And what that does is that's going to initialize everything, and it's going to configure the database so that it can actually work with Metasploit. So you should issue those 2 commands first, and then it'll give you some information about that and what's going on. And then once you've done that, you can then go into MSF console. And so run MSF console, let it load up, and then you'll be in Metasploit. And once you're in Metasploit, you can use the db_status command to make sure that you are connected to the MSF console, and it'll tell you the connection type and all that. So that's how you get the database actually started. And the database is super useful because when I was running nmap commands, or when I was doing scanning earlier in Metasploit, all of that information, it automatically gets saved for me, and then I can just look it up. So I can get like a quick summary of a target system, and it'll tell me what ports are open, what versions of everything there is. If I get credentials from a session, it'll tell me, it'll record those credentials, and it'll tell me how I can log into that session later using those credentials. It'll do all sorts of cool stuff. So the Metasploit database, super useful. Everybody should learn how to use it. And once you're in it, so now you've started up the Metasploit database, you've double checked using db status that it's actually running, you can use the workspace command. And what this does is it will allow you to split up your work so that you can stay organized. And this would be especially useful if you were running multiple penetration tests at once and working on multiple projects all at the same time simultaneously. And what you can do is you can create workspaces, and then that workspace is nice and separated from everything else, so you're not getting any targets mixed up, you're not getting credentials mixed up or versions mixed up on different targets. It's all separate and clean. So that's what a workspace does for you, is it helps keep that separate. By default, you are automatically in the default workspace when you start the Metasploit database. And you can use the -a command to create a workspace. So just workspace -a followed by the workspace name. And you can name it whatever you want. And then you can also delete workspaces using the -d command. It's the exact same. So if I wanted to delete this workspace, I would just do workspace -d, then TryHackMe, and that TryHackMe workspace would be deleted. Now, if you just type in workspace, what that does is it's going to show you what workspaces there are. And then whichever one has the asterisks, that's going to be the one that you are actually in, I believe. So you can use the workspace command followed by the name to jump into that workspace. So here's our workspace. We have default and TryHackMe. And right now they're in TryHackMe because of the asterisks. Yeah, that's right. I'm just trying to remember. So they're inside this TryHackMe workspace. Now when they type in workspace default and then type in workspace again to see what workspaces there are, the asterisk has moved. It's now inside, or it's now next to the default workspace. So that's how you can tell which workspace you're actually in. So yeah, keep that in mind because it's important that if you're scanning something and saving those scan results, that you're in the right workspace. So that's how you can jump between workspaces. There's lots of other commands that you can use. Just type in workspace -h, and that'll give you all of the different workspace commands. So that's really helpful. And then, yeah, here we go. So once you have the database actually started in Metasploit, if you type in the help command, it will now show you database backend commands. So let's say I just open up Metasploit like I have here, right? I didn't start, before I open this, I did not start a database. So if I type in help, it's gonna give me all these commands and it gives me, oh, hey, look at that. It's still nice. It gives me the database backend commands anyways. So maybe it always gives you this. I don't know. Here it says it needs to be launched with the database, but I guess that could have changed depending on which Metasploit version you're using. But either way, if you do launch a database before you start Metasploit and get that all set up, you will have all these backend database commands that you can use. So keep that in mind. Metasploit is really helpful. They really like to just lay everything out for you pretty easily and give you all the commands that you would need. So yeah, there's that. And then like we were talking about earlier, I think most people, I mean, can't speak for everybody, but I would argue that most people are probably using Nmap for their scanning rather than Metasploit modules. Not to bash on them. Metasploit modules are great, especially like I said, if you're looking for something very specific. But in general, you probably want to start with Nmap. And what you can do is if you use the db nmap command first, so you have to use, instead of just regular nmap, you got to do db_nmap. Then you follow that up with the nmap command, and it will save all of this information in the actual database for you, right? So that's really useful, but you got to remember you have to do db_nmap or else you'll just run an nmap scan and it won't save it to the actual Metasploit database that you've started. And then down here, you can type in hosts. So once you've actually run some scans, gathered some information, if you type in hosts, it'll tell you the hosts that you have scanned. So it gives you all this host information. And then if you type in services, which they type here, it'll tell you all of the different services running and what you know about those services so far. So if I ran this with do they run it with -sv? Yeah, they do. And so you get this service, some of the versions, and so then it displays that information right here, and you get that all in the info tab. So that's what you do is after you've gathered a lot of information, or let's say you have a multiple day penetration test, you can always come back and get a quick refresher from the database just by typing in hosts and services to see what's on there and what you've been looking at. So if you want to learn more about the different host and services options, then you can just do host or services -H, and that'll give you all of the commands that you can use with that. Now, let's say you're running, a penetration test and you have a host that is stored in the database like this. Now you can use the hosts -R command in the rhost parameter. So when we're in here, like before, and we were running different scans and looking at our options, we can type in hosts -R, and what that'll do is that will set whatever hosts you have in the database will automatically be set as the rhost parameter. So that's really useful, especially depending if you're doing a penetration test on like a bunch of computers all at once, like a big network, then that can be really useful, because if you want to scan all of the computers for something, you can just do hosts -R. And if you have a bunch of computers in this database, it'll scan all of them automatically. Now, if you're only using one, or if you're only like looking at one system, like in our case, we're doing boxes and TryHackMe and that stuff, you're usually only looking at one IP address. If that's the case, you can just set that IP address globally as the rhosts, and I talk about that in the Metasploit introduction video, so you can check that out there. And then here they give us an example workflow, so take a look at that, walk through it. But it's basically they're just using all this stuff we talked about. They're using the database to actually run this scanner. And this scanner is just telling them whether or not the system is vulnerable to a particular exploit. But they use hosts -R from this to actually run it. So take a look at that. Remember, like I said, db_nmap, super useful. And then the services with the -S parameter will let you actually search for a specific service. So that's really useful, especially if you have lots of computers and let's say you're running a network penetration test and there's like a ton of systems on it, and a lot of times you'll want to narrow things down based on service, because maybe you know that one computer has a vulnerable service and you want to see if other computers that you're testing have that vulnerable service. You can just type in services -S followed by your search term, so whatever you want to search, and then it'll give you the results right here. In this case, there's only the one, but in a real penetration test you might have many results there, so keep that in mind. And then they talk a little bit about low-hanging fruit that you'd probably want to look for as a penetration tester. These are some of the services that you would want to look at first, just to check out and see if you can exploit anything. So make sure you've read through everything, mark that as complete, and with that you are done with task number 3. Now it's on to task number 4, vulnerability scanning. Again, it's not really like full vulnerability scanning. All it is it's like an example workflow of finding that low-hanging fruit, and all that they're doing here is, they give you an example, like let's say you're on a computer, or let's say you're doing a penetration test, and on the system you notice that it has this VNC service running, right? So then it's like you can search or use this VNC scanner to see if it's actually using it, and then you can do VNC login. And so I'm not going to go too into this just because I think you can read it. The best part of this whole task is just the example. So yeah, we'll just answer the question and that'll be the most helpful. So who wrote the module that allows us to check SMTP servers for open relay? So how would I figure this out? So we're just going to search SMTP and see what we get. Okay, so we get 81 results. That's a lot, but that's still enough that we can kind of manually go through it, right? That's not too bad. So we want to know about open relay. So chances are there's going to be like OR or open relay somewhere. And so all the yellow is where SMTP is highlighted. So I'm kind of looking at that, and then I'm looking what comes right after it. And I'm looking for something that makes me think of open relays or just says open relays. So let's keep looking. There's an overflow. What else do we got? I probably went right past it. Sysgauge, WMail server, sendmail, enum, fuzzer, relay. Oh, here we go. What does this do? So then we can, once we find it, we can take a look at info. So SMTP open relay detection. There we go. Okay, so not 40, but 39. That's our guy. So now what I can do, use 39. And now let's, well, I don't want to show options. What was their question? I believe their actual question was, who wrote that module? So to know more about a module and how it works, you can type in the info button, and then it tells us this is the guy who actually wrote the module. So I'm just gonna paste that in there and hit submit. Okay, so that's kind of what this task is about. Is it's not really a vulnerability scan. It's showing you how to search through Metasploit and find, what you might be looking for that may be vulnerable based on other research that you've done or just past knowledge, right? So yeah, I don't love that they call this vulnerability scanning, and I'm never gonna get over it, but whatever. But it's still really useful that whole workflow that we just did to answer this question. That's a workflow that you will use all the time in Metasploit because you're constantly looking for stuff. So keep that in mind. And once you've read through all that, you can mark complete. Now it's on to task 5, exploitation. So as the name, it's an exploitation framework, blah, 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 blah. Let's see, this has a different machine. I wonder, could I just keep the machine that I have? Or I guess this says Metasploit scanning. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to terminate this machine just because Metasploit exploit. Yeah, so anytime they have one of these, some rooms are weird and you can just keep the same machine through the whole thing because they're all the same. And I don't know why they have these extra buttons. But in this case, just to be safe and in general, if you have a new start machine button, you should probably terminate your old machine and start the new one. So I just did, and that's why this title here changed. And pretty soon I'm gonna get a different IP address. So keep that in mind. So you can read through this. It talks about, the whole point of Metasploit is it's an exploitation framework. So they have lots of exploits. Again, it lets you do tons of other stuff, but they have mostly exploits. Talks about some different important commands that we've really already gone over. You've already seen, especially in the Metasploit introduction room. So again, if you don't know what these mean, like set payload, show options, then you got to check out that room. So they give us an example here of somebody actually exploiting the Eternal Blue exploit, which is a common Windows exploit that people like to test in like rooms and boxes. So read through all that. If you're unfamiliar with this, you can just take a look at it and kind of go through. But yeah, and then they set the L hosts. They must have the R host set as well. And then they go through and they get a shell, right? So you can read through that, but basically all they're doing is they found this exploit. So they're going to take a look at payloads. They're going to select the payload, and then they're going to fill in this information. I don't think they actually show them filling it in with a screenshot, but you would have to. You need to put in the R hosts. That's a required input, and then you have to put in the listening hosts for the payload. And so you would do that, and then you would hit run, and then you actually get a shell on the target system. And basically, when I say shell, you should be semi-familiar with that. If not, it just means you have now hacked into and connected to the target system. So they went from being on their own system in Metasploit down here, they're in this Windows System 32 folder. So they have hacked into that other computer and they are now inside of it. And once they're inside, they can background a session using Control-Z or just abort the session using Control-C. Did I say that right? That didn't sound right. Z and C sound too similar to me. So again, I'll say it one more time. Control-Z, that's going to background it. Control-C is going to abort the session and actually disconnect you from the computer. So keep that in mind. Now this is because when we're talking about Control-Z and Control-C, that is for all payloads, pretty much. You know what? Don't quote me on that. That is for, I would argue, 99% of payloads. These commands are going to work. If you're using a Meterpreter payload, then you can do the background command or the exit command, respectively, as well. So just keep that in mind, because you'll probably see me do it. And then, because I tend to use Meterpreter, and then you can just use background or exit. So this is what the session looks like. So now that they've background the session, they can type in sessions, and they actually see that, hey, you have a shell on, this computer. So that's what sessions does. So if you're doing a penetration test and you're hacking into multiple machines, you might type in sessions in Metasploit and you'll have a list of 5 or 6 different computers that you've actually hacked into. So if you want to know other commands that you can use with session, there are a lot, as you can see. Just type in sessions-h, and that'll help you run any session commands and interact with your sessions. Now, if you want to jump into a session or actually interact with it, you can do sessions-I followed by the session name, or not the session name, the session ID number, right? So that's what they do here. So up here, they're in Metasploit, and we can tell because they have this MSF6, blah, 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 right? And they list their sessions. They want to know, hey, what sessions do I have? And they see, oh, look at this. I have 1 session on a remote computer. So I want to jump back into that computer that I hacked and take a look around. So then what they do is they type in sessions-I1, and then Metasploit automatically will just give you that session back, and then you jump right back into the computer. So that's how sessions work, and we'll kind of get a workflow of doing that because we are now going to actually hack into a computer. So right here, exploit one of the critical vulnerabilities on the target VM, and the exploit that we're going to do is the same one that they do through this whole task. So you can look at that. I'm just going to go through it real quick because, like I said, it's a common exploit that people tend to use. So I'm going to search MS17, and then we're going to get all these results. I'm going to use 0, this eternal blue. This was the same one that they were using in the screenshots. So use 0 to actually jump into that. Now we can see our prompt is changed. We're inside the module. So I'm going to show options. Now, first thing we got to do is we got to set our hosts. So I'm going to do that first. And my R host is going to be my target machine. So that's going to be this. I'm just going to copy that to my clipboard. And then we will paste it. So there's my R host. Let's take a look at the other options, see what else I need. And then I can also just make sure that that was right. Great. So we don't need pass. We don't need user. None of that's required. You can see right here in this column whether or not something is needed to actually run. So here's my IP address, 10.10.24.242, and it's automatically already put that in as the listening hosts, and it's having me listen on port 4444. So it kind of already automatically sets it up. Now I could change the payload, but I like to use the Meterpreter shell. I think most people, if you can get a Meterpreter shell, they like to use it just because it functions better with Metasploit, which makes sense because it's their shell. So I'm just going to leave that. If you did want to change it, you could do the show payloads options or show payloads option. And now we can see we have 73 different payloads that we could potentially use in here. So now I could type in set payload followed by one of these numbers, and it would change the payload to something else. But I don't want to do that because I like the payload that they gave me. It's the default payload. So now if I show options again, I like my payload, everything looks good. So I can just issue the run command, or you could type in exploit. Either way, it does the same thing. So we'll give it a minute and let this run. Okay, so I just kind of jumped to this point. I just wanted to make a note. So I ran this command, and again, with exploits, things like that, things are fidgety and they don't always do what you want them to. So when I ran that command, it started opening a bunch of sessions on the remote system that I was targeting. It opened like 20 different sessions. And so I had to clean all that up and rerun the exploit. So as a tip, in case you need it, in case something like this happens to you, you can do sessions dash uppercase K, and that will automatically kill all of the sessions that you have in Metasploit. So I had to run that, kill all the sessions, and then rerun it. And now, as we can see, if I type in sessions here, why did that not work? You know what? Here, let me actually, I know why that didn't work. I didn't background it. So now if I go to sessions, I only have one session open, and your session ID, if the exploit worked the first time, your session ID should be 1. Mine's 25 because, like I said, it just automatically, for whatever reason, kept on opening sessions. So if something like that happens, you know, exit out, kill all your sessions. If you have to, you might even have to, you know, exit out of Metasploit and restart it. But no big deal, just did that. So now I have my sessions here. And so instead of hitting Control Z, I just typed in the background command to background this session. And now I have my session there. So let's go down to the questions. What were they? What is the content of the flag.txt file? Okay, so what we can do here is, now that I have my sessions, I can type in sessions I and 25. So now I'm jumping into this session based on its ID, 25. And so now that I'm in here, I'm gonna go all the way back to the root, or I guess not the root, we're not in Linux. This is the C drive. So now if I print working directory, I'm in the C drive. And now I want to search, I think it's search. Yeah, search -F. And then I'm going to search for flag.txt because I think that's what is the content of the flag.txt file. So I'm going to run that search and give that a minute to find that file. There we go. Okay, so it found where that file actually is. Now this -F flag, that just stands for search by file name. So it stands for file name because I know the file name that I'm looking for. So I can just type in search. -F stands for file name followed by the full file name. So yeah, I just wanted to explain that command a little bit for those of you who haven't used search command like this before. So now we know where that's at. We have the actual path. So what I can do is I am just gonna copy this. And then if I'm just gonna cat it directly / paste. Oh, never mind. Okay, I guess it doesn't let me paste that. Why won't it let me paste it? Copy, cat, and then I'm gonna oh, you know what? It might be because this is using backslashes and they probably want /. That's my guess. So we'll see if I'm right. So does that work? You know what? I messed up. It's not user, it's users. There we go. Okay, so that is our flag. So we can copy that. We'll paste it in there. And you can mark both of those complete because we have exploited the critical vulnerability. And now it wants to know what is the NTLM hash of the password of the user pirate. Okay, so how do we find the NTLM hash? So let me, oh, can I not clear this? I guess not. Okay, so when you're inside the shell, I guess you can't clear your terminal. Didn't know that. So what we're gonna do here is we actually want to dump the hashes, right? Because we need to know the NTLM hash, which is the hash format for Windows of this user pirate. So what I can do is if I just go to help, yep, if you just type in help, then it's gonna give me a list of commands that I can run inside of Meterpreter, right? So it gives me some core commands. Oh, this even gives me commands for oh, no. This is all inside Meterpreter because we're inside the Meterpreter shell. So we can look at these big categories. So we're not going to be in filing categories. It's not a network command. It might be a system command. And I already know what it is. I'm just kind of showing you how you would find it if you didn't know. I mean, you could always Google it, which would be a bit faster, but hey, you never know. Password database commands. Okay, here we go. So hash dump, that's the command, and this will dump the contents of the SAM database. So you can search for it this way just on Metasploit, or you could always Google it. And so now we can type in hash dump, and it's gonna dump all the hashes. So these are NTLM hashes. So they wanna know the NTLM hash of the password of the user pirate. Now, what you could do is you could copy this, paste this into Google or paste it into ChatGPT and have it explain to you the different parts if you don't know a lot about NTLM hashes, but I'll just tell you for now. So the first part is gonna be the username. Honestly, I don't remember what the second part is. I'm sure it's semi-important. And then this part, this AA, blah, 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 all the way up until that colon, this is blank. And that's because NTLM hashes, it's a combination of an older hashing version, older hash that's no longer useful, and a new hash. And so now they call it NTLM, kind of funky. So this first part, in most of the computers and boxes that you're going to be using, this whole first part is useless now because people just leave it empty because it's not a secure hash. And so the hash that you're usually looking for comes right after it, this second part. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste it and submit that. And that is my answer. So there you go. With that, we are done with task number 5. Now it's on to task number 6, MSF Venom. So here we have a new machine that we can start. So I'm going to terminate this machine, because you always want to use whichever machine they tell you to. And now, oh, look at that. Okay, so yeah, down here in the split view, you can jump between the machines. So keep that in mind. Right now, I have my, So I'm going to exit, and I use the -Y because sometimes it'll ask you, are you sure you want to exit? Because in Metasploit's mind, it's like, you just hacked into a computer. Are you really sure you want to give that up? But if you type in exit -Y, it'll automatically just exit you out of everything. So now I'm just going to clean all this up for our next task, go back, and now I'm back in the main Metasploit console. So task 6, now that we're all prepped and ready to go, and that machine should be ready in the next 20-ish seconds. So task 6, all about MSF Venom. And MSF Venom is part of Metasploit, but it's also its own standalone tool because it is so useful. And basically what MSF Venom does is it creates payloads for you. And payloads are, again, really useful because when you're hacking into something, right, if you can get a payload to it, then you can get a connection to it, and then you can hack into it and actually be on the system and start issuing your commands, wreaking havoc or doing whatever you want to do. So what MSF Venom does is if you use the MSF-L payloads, this is going to list all of the available payloads. And this is not comprehensive at all. They just showed you a little screenshot. But as you can see, we have all these payloads. And it's usually done, the first part is usually just the operating system followed by the shell type, right? And we have all these different kinds, and in these descriptions, they tell us what these shells or what these payloads are actually used for, okay? So this is really, really useful just in general. Even if you're not using Metasploit, you will still probably use MSF Venom just because it's an easy way to get a payload into your hands, and then you can give that payload out to actually hack into something. You can also list the different formats because it has different output formats. Here, the output format they use is raw, and they encode it using the -E parameter, okay? So, because this also comes with encoders. So that'll be like, for example, in this case, I'm pretty sure they base 64 encoded it. So that's what they're doing here. So you can look through this example. This -P up here, that stands for payload. It then provides the whole payload, followed by the listening hosts, and then the format -F, it's going to be in raw, and then -E for encode. They want to encode it in base 64. So that's kind of a basic of how it works. You know, I'm not going to go into too much detail. You'll get better with MSF Venom as you use it because, again, super useful. You'll use it a lot. And then you have handlers. And so what handlers do is I think of them as they're like, it's like you're playing baseball and there's a pitcher and a catcher. And a handler is the catcher, usually, if you're, you know, doing reverse stuff. But we won't get too in depth. So basically, when you create a payload, you send that payload to your target machine. So I'm trying to hack into this computer. If I can get that computer to run the payload, then it will make a connection to me. But how do I accept the connection? You accept the connection by using a handler, okay? And so in Metasploit, that's automatically done. Like when we were in here earlier and we ran our this exploit, it automatically set up a handler for us. But this time, I think we're gonna actually manually set up a handler. So here they give us another example, and I'll just run through this real quick. So MSF Venom, payload, that's the -P. They then give you the PHP/reverse PHP. That's the payload type that they want to use. They set the L hosts. They set the L port. The format is going to be raw. And then this is going to be the output. So they're saying the output file that I want is going to be named reverse_shell.php. And now this is what that looks like. If they actually look at the reverse shell.php that they just created, this is what it looks like. And this is the payload. And if you know a little bit of PHP, it might be a good exercise to read through that and try and understand what exactly is going on. So in this example, what they now have to do is they now have to edit it, because up here they have all this, it's commented out. And so if you remove that, now it's an actual PHP script. They save it, and then they set up their handler. So what they're doing here is this is the whole process that we're about to go through of actually like exploiting a computer using MSF Venom. And so they go through all that, they set up their payload. That's what that whole top part is. Now they're gonna set up their handler. So they go into Metasploit, they search multi/handler, find it, they're using that. They set all the options, and then they run it. And now it started a TCP handler on this IP address. This is the, port number. And then, so read through all that. That's kind of how they do it. And then they give you some other payload options. Now, these payloads are going to be some of the most common ones that you will run into, because it's not every day that we're doing, Android hacking. For most people, if that's what you do, then that's what you do. But most of the time, if you're on TryHackMe or Hack the Box, you're going to be doing Linux stuff. So the ELF format, you're going to be doing Windows. You might be doing PHP or ASP, and you're probably doing some Python. So they have those listed out for us, which is really helpful. So now we're going to answer some of the actual questions. This is where it's going to get good, and we're going to actually walk through the whole process that they just did. So hopefully that'll help you understand a bit more. So launch the VM attached to this task. The username is Murphy, and the password, they give us the password. We can connect via SSH or launch this machine in the browser. So what I'm actually going to do I want to connect via SSH? Yeah, why not? Okay, so I'm gonna SSH, and the password name was Murphy at Murphy, if I can spell. And then I need that new IP address that they just gave me. So we're gonna do at, and then we're gonna paste that. So now I'm SSHing in, yes. And the password 1Q2W3E4R. There we go. Okay. Okay, so I was dumb and I SSH'd into the machine right here straight from Metasploit. So I just cleared my whole terminal, got that cleaned up. So this box right here, this 10104128, that is the target box that I'm trying to get into. Then here, right next to that, this is my machine, and I'm in MSF console here. And then up here in this tab, this is just my regular old machine. Okay. So I kind of have these three tabs open, and I'm going to be jumping between them. So it gets a little tricky. MSF console, that's easy to recognize because of the terminal. And this one on the far left, this is the machine I'm trying to attack. And on the far right, this is my machine. Okay. So, and you can just, and I already switched into the root user. So that'll make, like I said, this a lot easier. So the first thing we want to do is create a interpreter payload in the ELF format on the attack box or your attacking machine of choice. So what I'm going to do is I'm lazy, and I'm just going to copy this command, and then we'll edit it. So I'm going to paste that in. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change this name to just shell.elf because I think it's easier. Now the listening port, I'm going to do 4444 because that's the default port for Metasploit. And then the listening host, so because I'm doing a reverse shell, oh, wait a minute. See, I've already messed up because I am currently on the target machine. So I want to be on my machine because in the real world, I don't know if this machine has MSF Venom installed on it, but in the real world, most machines don't just have that installed on it. So instead, you want to be on your machine. So now I'm back on my machine. So now I can run MSF Venom. I'll fill it out the exact same way, 444. And then the port that I want to listen to, the listening host is actually going to be myself. So I'm going to do .241.242. And then I like the payload. This is a Meterpreter reverse TCP Linux payload. So everything looks good there. So I'm going to run that command and give it a minute to load. Okay, great. So now I can see my shell.elf. Now I'm going to give this permissions. So 777, I'm pretty much just giving it all of the permissions. So what I'm saying here essentially is anybody can do anything they want with this shell.elf. So now what I need to do, so now that I've done that, I already accidentally marked these, but you can mark this complete. Now they want us to transfer it to the target machine that we were just on, right? So this is the target machine, this is where I'm at, and now I have my shell.elf. So the way that I transfer that is I actually use this Python 3 command. So what this is doing, I'll just explain it for you as it loads. So I am starting a Python server, and I am putting all of this stuff, all my files here in this area where I'm at, in this directory, are being hosted on the internet, and I'm doing that through Python. This -m stands for module. So I'm just setting up a simple Python server, and I am hosting all of my files out there on the internet for anybody to grab. And so now we're on the target machine. We're actually going to grab those files, and we're going to do wget, and then we want the IP address of my actual machine that I'm working from. So .242, and don't worry if this is kind of confusing, just because you have different IP addresses and we're talking about a target machine versus your attack box, and it can kind of get confusing. But just to clarify, I am running this command on the target machine. So this is the one that I SSH'd into. And so now I just downloaded that from my attack box, and now I'm going to do the same thing here. chmod 777, and I want to do that for the shell.elf. Now it's actually executable. So now I'm going to get ready to execute this, but I'm not going to execute it yet, because the first thing I have to do is I have to set up my handler to actually accept the connection. So I'm going to search multi-handler. I'm going to use number 7. And now I'm going to go show options. Okay. So I already got this all set up. But what you will have to do is first you'll want to set the listening host. And you're going to want to set that to your own IP address. And then you're also going to want to set the listening port. And so what you're going to do there is you want to set that to whatever you put using MSF Venom, right? So when I put MSF Venom, when I created my payload, I put a listening host and I put a listening port. So you're going to want to put a matching numbers right here, listening host, listening port. They should be the same. Then what you have to do, because this generally by default is set to generic reverse TCP. So you have to actually set the payload, and then what you can do is you can just copy this part. So this payload that you put in your MSF Venom, I want you to copy that and then just do set payload and then paste it in. Okay. Oh, not that. I copied the wrong thing. But yeah, set payload, and then you're just going to copy this part, this Linux-x86-interpreter-reverse TCP, because the handler payload has to match the MSF Venom payload. Okay. So now that we've done that, we're going to actually run this. So we're going to run it and give it a minute. Okay, great. So now it started our handler. So now it is listening and it is waiting for a connection on 4444, right? That's what our machine's doing. So now I'm going to go back to our target machine. So when I run this, I'm going to hit enter. And now what should happen is I should, in MSF console, get a reverse shell, or I should get a meterpreter shell. And there we go. So now if I ls, we're in here. Let me cd back to root. Do I see my shell? Here it is, shell.elf, right? So now these are the exact same. So this is the machine I SSH'd into, and now I am inside that machine, but I have a meterpreter shell, okay? So I know it's a little tricky. There's quite a bit going on, so take your time. You can go through it slow. So we already started our server, so you can mark complete. We got a meterpreter session on the target machine, okay? So now it wants us to dump hashes of the other users on the system. And if we remember from before, I can go back to my meterpreter shell and I can do hash dump. Okay, so for whatever reason, it won't let me hash dump. Oh, okay. I'm being silly. Last time we were on a Windows machine. Now we've hacked a Linux machine. So I don't hash dump. What I do is I cd into the etc folder, ls. There's a bunch of stuff in there. And I can't remember. I think it's shadow. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm being dumb again. You don't cd into shadow. Shadow is a file. So what you do is you cat shadow, right? Because you can't cd into a file. It's not a, or you have to, you can only cd into directories. That's what this error is telling me right here. So I can't actually cd into shadow, but I can cat shadow. And if I do that, it's going to give me, these are the usernames, and this is like the Linux formatting for the password hashes. Okay, so the way that this works is this whole first chunk. Wait, let me see actually. Let me just double check, make sure I have it right. Yeah, so this whole first chunk, I don't know if this is what they want. So we're gonna just copy that and paste it, see if that's what they're looking for. Oh, that is what they're looking for. Okay, great, that's the correct answer. So this is the other user's password hash, because we logged in as Murphy, so now we're giving them Claire's password hash, and they want this whole thing. In reality, these are different parts. This $6 is telling you what kind of hash it is. And so I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, the part that you would want if you were like hash cracking is just this end part, right? So keep that in mind. But in the question, they wanted the whole thing. So copy this whole thing for Claire. You can copy that, paste it in, mark that complete, and mark this complete. And with that, you have finished this MSF Venom task number 6. That one's a little extensive, a little confusing. Don't feel bad if it didn't totally make sense. Again, for you to really understand this, you should have some experience learning about reverse shells, binding shells, the beginnings of Metasploit. So there's quite a few prereqs to really understand what's going on here. I tried to help as much as I could, assuming that you knew nothing, but it would be hard to follow. So don't feel bad if you're a little behind on that. That's a tough one to follow if you have no background. And if you found it hard, check out my other videos. They have full walkthroughs going over all sorts of that kind of stuff. So now it's on to task number 7. This is just the summary. So read through it. You can mark complete. So with that, you've finished task number 7. Hopefully you found the video helpful. If you did, give it a like and subscribe. That helps me out a ton. And with that, we have completed the Metasploit Exploitation room from TryHackMe.